President Abraham Lincoln was asked during the Civil War if he thought God was on our side. And he replied, "I'm rather more concerned whether or not we are on God's side." A little bit twist there. I must say, I don't think I've ever felt more the outcast, more of an outsider than since the day I embraced the way of God's nonviolent third way of Jesus that we talked about. Even among fellow believers, Miss Nancy and I have been treated kind of like oddballs. It's like, what's that all about? And I don't expect to win anyone over this evening either. It's going to be up to the Holy Spirit to convict each and every one of us the way we live our lives. But I do want to share some of the experiences we've had along these lines that may help you make decisions in the future. The ultimate question, and I've said this before, the central dilemma for any Christian believer is this: how do we fight evil without becoming evil ourselves? And nonviolence is really the only solution to this. The third way of Jesus Christ is not a law, it's a gift. When two opposing forces, ideas, or beliefs meet, and when compromise is impossible, a struggle will result. In that struggle, we have been given two options all through history. We can either fight back or we can run away. We can fight it out violently by escalating our use of weapons: fist, knife, gun, rocket launcher, tank, nuclear weapons. We've talked about this before. That's the granddaddy of all weapons. You know, we saw this last week the mother of all weapons being dropped in Syria, or no, in Afghanistan. Sorry, no, but nuclear weapons are really the granddaddy of all weapons. At that point, our problems are solved, right? Everything is reduced to radioactive dust, and we're all vaporized. Or, you know, there's the option of being a guerrilla fighter. He who fights and runs away lives to fight another day. Woo. That's another option, right? But the life and example, the words of Jesus Christ give us a third option. I will stand with the truth no matter what it costs me, no matter what you do to me. And as we see in the life of Jesus Christ, taking the low position, taking the humble and the loving position, creates an immovable force that causes the world to trip over it. And for 2,000 years, that's all people have been talking about. How did this one person, Jesus Christ, cause the whole world to change course? How did it happen in my life? How did it happen in other people's lives? Let us take a look at Matthew 5, 38 through 41. You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I tell you not to resist an evil person. But whoever slaps you on your right cheek, turn to him the other also. If anyone wants to sue you and take away your tunic, let him have your cloak also. And whoever compels you to go 1 mile, go with him 2. Now this week I'm going to talk about that last verse, going the extra mile. And just as we said last week, turning the other cheek is an act of love and resistance. So I think we're going to find the same thing this week with going the second mile. We will find that it is a creative and loving response to violence and evil. And Jesus did not tell his parables and stories in a vacuum. He was not speaking theology here that can be picked apart by middle-class Americans 2,000 years later, although we can do that. No, he was a real person saying real things to real people. These are practical ways of resisting evil for people who lived then and for us today. At the time of Christ, it was the practice of a Roman soldier that could stop anyone along the road and compel them or command them to carry his pack 1 mile. But since this pack weighed 70 or 80 pounds, he could not require that person to carry the pack more than 1 mile. It was against the law, against the military code to carry that pack more than 1 mile. Mile markers were even placed along the road, like we have today, to ensure that this law was carried out and no further. So Jesus could have said, excuse me, revolt against these evil soldiers in this evil Roman system. He could have said, throw that pack down, and don't even carry it 1 mile, because you'd be aiding and abetting your enemies. Throw it down and pull your sword and try to behead that Roman soldier. But that's not what he tells us, is it? Why in the world would Jesus tell us to carry that pack an extra mile? Well, let's just imagine what it's like if you're a lowly civilian, someone who's just been forced to carry the pack a mile, and you just cheerfully say, "Oh, please, sir, let me carry that pack another mile for you." What is the reaction of this soldier? It's like, what are you trying to do? Get me in trouble? What are you trying to get me thrown in prison? Of course you're not going to carry that pack another mile. And your response can be, "Oh no, sir. You see, I am a follower of Jesus Christ. It's my main job to love people. I would like to carry that pack an extra mile so I can show you the love of Jesus Christ." I used to be a soldier myself, in fact. I thought I was a green giant striding across the landscape with my guns and my rocket launchers and my tanks. But then I discovered the love of Jesus Christ, and all that changed. You see what I'm saying here? Showing the love of Christ to others, living the way of Christian love in our daily lives, changes everything. It certainly changed me. And Jesus didn't use a gun to lead me to the foot of the cross. I went willingly. The great thing about starting a new ministry now is that, being an older person, I can tell some of these old stories again because you haven't heard them. And it's not like you're going to roll your eyes and go like, "Oh, that old guy, I've heard him 100 times already, and oh, here we go again." See, you just have to keep starting new ministries so you can just tell the same stories over and over again, right? But I do have a couple of stories that I'll finish this series about nonviolence with. Extraordinary stories, really. The first one, Miss Nancy and I used to do a ministry in the park in Durango among the homeless. And the homeless population can be a violent kind of group of people. They drink, they do drugs, they haven't been raised very well in many cases. They maybe have a military background of their own that was a bad experience, and they're just feeling guilty and angry and frustrated. And so we held a church in the park, the one across from South City Market over there, down by the river, and we would sometimes have 50 people show up for church, and we would feed them afterwards, soup or whatever. And this one Sunday, two guys got in a fight, and I went in and I broke them up, and the one guy started going up the hill, and he decided it wasn't finished. So he reached in his pack and pulled out a gun and pointed it at the other guy, but I happened to be right in the middle, right? I was like, what? Well, Miss Nancy threw up her hands, I guess, to just show him that she wasn't armed in any way, and she started walking toward the guy, and everybody was like, what? And the guy himself just freaked out. He was like, what? This lady's coming at me, and so he stashed the gun back in his pack and took off running, and he was captured later and probably did some jail time. But the point is that Miss Nancy was able to defuse that situation without any kind of weapons other than the faith in Jesus Christ to change that outcome there. And then the final story here. Miss Nancy and I were in Romania, and we had finished our mission in Romania, and we were in the market square. We were buying some things. We were going to buy some like doilies and handmade crafts so that we could bring them home and sell them so that we could finance like another trip to Romania. And so basically we were just tourists at that point. And I was standing with the Romanian pastor that was with us, and he tapped me on the shoulder and said, he pointed out that a commotion had broken out. This was in the market square, so there were a lot of people around. And there was a commotion going on. And he said, they just caught a gypsy boy stealing, and now they're going to make an example of him. And sure enough, the shopkeeper he was probably a 10-year-old boy, took him and turned him over, flipped him around, had his arm like this, and threw him on the ground and began kicking him in the ribs. And people from around started closing in. I don't know whether it was the attraction or like, you know, the blood getting up. They just started closing in on this scene of this boy being kicked by this shopkeeper. And all I can say is I was filled with the Holy Spirit. There's really no other way of putting it. It wasn't something I could plan out. But I went through the crowd and got to the place where this boy was laying down on the ground, and I put my body down over his, because I would rather be kicked myself than to see some 10-year-old kid being kicked like that. And the shopkeeper stopped. It was like, who would expect somebody to do that, you know? And then I reached up and I stroked the shopkeeper's head, and he jumped back like, what is this freak, you know? What is he, crazy? And at that point I was able to scoop the boy up, and his mother was coming down through the crowd screaming gypsy curses at everybody, and I was able to hand him off to her, and she took him and they left. And at that point, the whole mission team was kind of like stunned, like, and me included, like, wow, did you see that? How did that happen, you know? And we reflected on it later. It was like the perfect thing that the Holy Spirit could do to change the outcome of that situation. Because if I'd have gone in there as a tourist and say, oh, you guys shouldn't be doing this, they would either ignore me or laugh at me or something. And if I went in with some kind of weapon, it was a whole crowd of people, they could have easily overpowered me and thrown me out, you know, or kicked me around. But in this situation, it was the Christian nonviolence that changed the outcome. And it gives us other options. It gives us other solutions to problems. If we pull a gun and start banging away, they pull a gun and start banging away back, right? That's just the reaction of the world. So I want to challenge you to live the way of Christian love and nonviolence in your own lives. And you know, Jesus tells us, go and do likewise. I would challenge you to go and do likewise. If you ever have any questions about this, we have many more stories, believe me, and most of them I doubt you've heard 100 times, so we could share them with you at any point if you're interested in hearing more about this way of nonviolence.